I've said it before, but PlatinumGames is one of my favorite developers on planet Earth. I had the great pleasure to visit them back in late 2019 before the world shut down for the pandemic, and I had an incredible time going through the studio and catching up with creators there and getting a sense of what was to come from the studio. And I have always been impressed by the creativity and the imagination and the ambition of PlatinumGames. I was not super impressed, however, by Bayonetta 3. It kind of let me down. I felt like it didn't reach far enough and there was a lot of routine in the game. So I didn't know quite what to expect from Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon. This is a very interesting pivot away from what we have come to know from the Bayonetta franchise, which has always focused on this Umbran witch and her incredible abilities and the catalog of interesting friends that she has around her. And what we get with Bayonetta Origins is a storybook, a game that is tailored almost for kids or for family-friendly fun, which is a very strange departure from Bayonetta, which has been hyper-violent, hyper-sexualized, and there's been a lot of cuss words. It's had the M rating all the way along from the early Bayonetta games to Bayonetta 3, and here we have a T-rated game, which has a little bit of violence in it, and maybe some intense sequences, but for the most part, it's like you're riffing through this watercolor storybook, which echoes a little bit of Alice in Wonderland and some other storybooks and fables that we may have seen before, but the idea here with this game is we're seeing Cereza come into her own. She's an Umbran witch in training, and she's being guided along and challenged, and along the way, she connects with this stuffed animal named Cheshire, who also features prominently in the main Bayonetta franchise as well, but Cheshire is imbued with the spirit and the ferocity of a demon that has all kinds of abilities, and what you do is you control one character, Cereza, with the left thumbstick, and you control another character, Cheshire, with the right thumbstick, and you use the trigger buttons for attacks and hold spells. And so there is this rubbing your belly, patting your head kind of mechanic with the game. We've seen this employed in other games like Brothers, and a lot more co-op experiences like No Way Out and It Takes Two. And we've also seen PlatinumGames use the right analog thumbstick to control the Legion robots in the incredible Astral Chain. But this is a very interesting setup for a Bayonetta game because we're top-down, the camera are out of your control, you're controlling the two different characters, and the combat is smoothed to make it much more accessible for the fact that you're dealing with this weird combination of controls and trying to connect with these two different characters at the same time. And it was incredibly difficult for me to make that connection when I had characters cross over. And so I was controlling Cheshire over here and I had Cereza over here, and my mind was just trying to figure it all out. So what the developers have done is they've tamed a lot of the combat sequences so that there is a button mashing kind of procedure to get through some of the battles. Now, this kind of leap into creating a different experience is something to be applauded. And I think that the Bayonetta franchise and the story around Bayonetta is so rich, and there's so many different twists and turns and different characters that can pop up and populate. And you'll see threads and connections across all of the Bayonetta games in Bayonetta Origins, which I think is fantastic. But I did find this game not as enjoyable to play in its second-to-second gameplay as I have found in previous Bayonetta adventures. And I think a large part of that has to do with this watercolor storybook visuals, which look beautiful, by the way. They're very colorful, they're very hyper-detailed in a very abstract kind of way, but it's that abstraction that makes it difficult to understand exactly where the characters are supposed to traverse. And I know that that's a big part of the puzzle dynamic as well, because Cereza has different access points on a given stage or a given area than Cheshire does. Cheshire has a bigger jump, and Cereza can walk through some poison bushes, which Cheshire is very opposed to. And so every time you're walking through an environment or walking through an area, there is this kind of puzzle-solving mechanic about where you can go and where this other character can go and how they can work together. Because at one point, Cheshire starts to gain all of these elemental abilities that give him the opportunity to whip out his tongue and grab a flower and pull it towards him, and that flower becomes a bridge. And so you're constantly being tested and having to use your problem-solving skills to figure out exactly how to keep progressing. And that was cool, and we've seen that employed in lots of great puzzle adventure games like the Zelda franchise, and I thought that was all right, but I felt like because I was controlling two characters at the same time, there was a lot of stumbling and bumbling and sort of trying to navigate around corners that you think you can get to, or, walking into invisible walls and going down a path that you think it will lead somewhere, but it ends up not. So you're sort of just moving around inside of the environment. And I think if you play a game like this with a tremendous amount of patience and you love the lore and you love the world, you're just going to get caught up in it. But for me, I was constantly aware of how much time I was spending not getting where I wanted to go, or where the wolf tracks were leading me to, because there's this mysterious wolf that's following you everywhere and sort of giving you a bit of a guidance. But I would pop out to the map and try to decipher what the map was telling me, and because everything is so abstract and so, purposefully weird and gorgeous, it also made it frustrating to figure out, okay, where do I have to go? What do I have to do? How do I get through here? And even, I played through the whole game. I beat the game, beat the final boss. And I think that combination of the game sort of expecting you to kind of fumble along and figure things out, plus the fact that most of the fights that you're going to get into, at least at normal difficulty, were pretty routine, and there was a bit of a repetition to it. I didn't really feel challenged much up until the very last boss in the game, where, of course, Cereza has started to understand her powers and her skills and abilities, and it gets a lot more intense. I'm not showing any of that. But for the most part, the game is kind of the same all the way through. You gain some new abilities for Cheshire, and of course you can unlock some skills on the skill tree, and you can concoct different potions and things to help you in battle and to heal you. But there was this kind of sameness all the way through. It's like we got a kind of pinky green world. We got a kind of snowy white kind of area. And then there was these more psychedelic areas in the game where the world looks like some kind of gelatinous kind of shake where you walk into, and it's very spooky. It's like spooky jello area where the fairies will pop up. Because the whole time you're battling all of these different fairies, and they come in various sizes with different abilities. They might have some electrical abilities. They might have shields, they might hurl some fire at you, and so you're being tested a little bit, but it became pretty easy to just freeze them with Cereza's ability, because that's really the core ability that she has. She can lock everybody in place. You have this kind of mini rhythm game where you lock characters in place, or you lock objects in place, and sometimes you can rewind time and fix things a little bit, but that's pretty much it for most of the game with Cereza. And then it's Cheshire that does all of the offensive moves and all of the battling with all of the different characters, and then Cheshire becomes much more powerful with all of the elemental attacks that he acquires along the way. So it was much more fun to play as Cheshire with that right thumbstick and get into the battles. But I wasn't moved by them. I didn't feel like I was wowed too much by them. I felt like I saw a lot of the same stuff over and over again, and it felt like because I had some issues with the navigation and I wasn't really that blown away by getting into the battles or even the storytelling, which has some decent voice work, although I heard the word Cheshire way too many times, and it has some sumptuous, gorgeous music. That's something that I definitely will highlight here with this game. It's absolutely beautiful. As a visual statement, it's beautiful. Just to look at it, it's beautiful. And also the music and the sound effects, all that is just absolutely gorgeous. It's really a tour de force that way. But there is this sameness all the way, and it felt like the game was treading water. It felt like the game would have been better served to trim down some, to make it maybe half the price and half the length, and it would have been a better statement. I think it kind of overstays its welcome, because it is a fairly meaty game. You're going to be able to put a good 15 hours into it. There's extra content after you finish it. Of course, there's higher difficulties, so you can play through the story again. And I think the diehards that love Bayonetta are going to love the threads and the connections and some of the mysteries that get unlocked, although it also poses some new questions as well. But for me, I finished the game, and although I applauded the sort of production qualities of it, I felt like the experience of playing it, frankly, it was just okay. So I'm kind of torn with this. I love that PlatinumGames is trying new things always, and I'm such a massive fan of the company and their creativity, but this one, just like Bayonetta 3, didn't blow me away. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.